I think we're living inside of 2 billion Truman shows.
A new report out of the UK finds that people here are looking at their phones every 12 minutes and spending about 24 hours online every week.
Of the iPhone in 2007, they were so excited to be packing so much stuff into this one little device so you could take your life everywhere.
Basically like a phone, but you can wear it. Isn't that funny?
The evolution of technology has been nothing short of astounding. Phones, tablets, games consoles, and a myriad of other devices have transformed our lives in unimaginable ways. On screen now, and for the next few minutes, I'll be referring to the works of Dr. Jean-Philippe Chaput, whilst investigating the timeline of technological advances. We've come a long way in the last few decades, so where do we even begin? On September 7th, 1927, in a laboratory in San Francisco, history was made as Farnsworth unveiled his invention to the world, the first fully functional electronic television system. As the flickering images danced across the screen, the audience was captivated by the promise of this new medium. Farnsworth had achieved the impossible, bringing the world one step closer to the age of mass communication. Technology has since evolved from this primitive state. Of course, this doesn't touch upon modern media as of yet, but I feel it's important to note the rampant increase in advances over the next 50 years when it comes to technology. Besides this, it was in the late 1950s, nearly 30 years later, that televisions were a quintessential household item. Moving on February 14th, 1946, the world bore witness to the birth of ENIAC. A behemoth of wires and vacuum tubes, it represented the culmination of years of tireless effort and groundbreaking innovation. Morkey, Eckert, as well as the rest of the team's pioneering work, paved the way for the modern computer revolution. As that brings us to our next point, we have the introduction of the first video game. Additionally, the first computer tablet, but this was vastly overshadowed due to its lack of adoption at the time. In the late 1960s, a pioneering project called ARPANET emerged from the US Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency.
He and Vint Cerf made it together, and that's the Internet protocols. It was, I think, the single largest engineering invention of the 20th century.
This prototype of the internet revolutionized communication and information exchange, laying the groundwork for our modern digital era. And finally, we have the groundbreaking innovation that changed the way that we connect, the first mobile phone. Developed by Motorola engineer Martin Cooper, this handheld device paved the way for the mobile revolution, transforming communication from stationary to on the go, forever altering the course of human interaction. From here onwards, we enter a new stage of the technological advancement's life cycle, the growth stage. With wider acceptance and demand for these products, there are huge jumps in tech just in the next few decades. The World Wide Web, conceived by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989, was a revolutionary invention that transformed the internet into an accessible interactive medium. Envisioned as a way to facilitate information sharing between scientists around the world, it introduced the concept of web pages that could be linked via hyperlinks, accessed through browsers, and even housed on servers. This innovation officially launched in 1991, breaking down barriers and connecting humanity in ways previously unimaginable. And then, in 1992, we get a glimpse into the future with the first ever smartphone, the IBM Simon. Launched to the public in 1994, the IBM Simon was ahead of its time, featuring a touchscreen interface which was a revolutionary concept for mobiles back then. It allowed users to make and receive calls, send and receive faxes, emails, and cellular pages. Additionally, Simon came equipped with a calendar, address book, world clock, calculator, notepad, and even a simple few games. These applications made it incredibly advanced for its era, showcasing functionalities that would become standard in mobile devices that followed. Surprisingly, it wouldn't be adaptable at the time due to its high costs and limited infrastructure for mobile data. Now, the statistical timeline I've been referencing does end here. However, for our narrative, it's only about halfway through, as we move on to the next stage of adoption, maturity. It's the 2000s, and with technology starting to become more readily available, we're starting to see it everywhere. In the maturity stage, mobile phones underwent significant evolution in terms of design, features, and functionality, along with many other advancements for home computers, televisions, games consoles, and so much more. Phones became synonymous with society, and almost like an accessory. Flip phones and candy bar style were dominant, offering varying degrees of compactness and style. Color displays began to replace the monochrome screens, and built-in cameras became standard features, allowing users to capture photos on the go. Now, you may have realized I've been referencing the advancements of technology as a typical product lifecycle, going through different stages as it develops. But I'm still yet to mention the last step, the downfall. Now, of course, I don't think necessarily that this is the downfall of technology, since there is still so much innovation right now. But instead, I'm referencing its capability to actually impact us positively anymore. And since it's become an ever-growing topic of discussion, maybe it's time to start looking at the negatives of screen time in a much more upfront way. This section isn't going to explain the advancements anymore, as in a way we're still living out this timeline in new age tech. Instead, this is going to look into the relationship we've built with the technology at hand. However, I will discuss one more graph from the aforementioned researcher to explain the adoption of such devices. The graph is since dated, but shows relevant trends in regards to modern screen time consumption. Cell phones were of course already established, and by the end of the graphic, over 90% of participants owned one. Computers were also almost a household essential at this point, but found a decline in users once tablets started to really pick up. Games consoles stayed at a steady 40% average, meanwhile smartphones saw a huge rise in popularity, amassing more than double its already 30% user base in the short 4.5-year span. You can see from this that smartphones and tablets really shot up in popularity, and it's no surprise, since the dream of yesterday was now a reality. Today, almost all Americans at 97% own a mobile phone. This translates to 330.8 million people, and about 9 out of 10 Americans own a smartphone. This number is insane, and to make a final note of how incredible that really is, here's what we started with 70 years ago, and now, nearly 3/4 of a century later, it's in the palm of nearly everyone's hand. I think the accessibility now and almost reliability we have on devices is why it's so important to think about screen time, and a huge factor as to why I'm making this documentary. We have new age technology pouring out of our ears, and there's no point really in carrying on our timeline as we'd be here forever. But that's not to say that it wasn't important looking back. When technology first came out, it was weird and wacky, and it took a while to really adapt to it. And we've come to a point now where we're doing the same thing with present day projects. All in all, it's great the leaps and bounds people took in the last century, as that is what actually cultivated positively affecting technological advancements. Regardless, it's time now to take a look at the adverse effects of new age tech, whether it's good or bad. In our digital age, screen time is an integral part of daily life, serving as a double-edged sword with both positive and negative implications. On the brighter side, screens are windows to a world of knowledge and connectivity. They facilitate access to vast amounts of information, learning, and instant communication across the globe. In a professional realm, screens enable remote jobs, breaking down geographical barriers and offering flexibility in work environments. Additionally, screens serve as a platform for creativity and self-expression through digital art, writing, and multimedia projects. They provide entertainment, offering a wide range of content from movies and music to games and virtual reality. With all that said, it's no surprise to see an epidemic with screen time on the rise. These devices are incredible, and we wouldn't want to live without them nowadays. But conversely, the presence of screens in our lives raises concerns about physical and mental health. Excessive screen time has been associated with eye strain, poor posture, and an increased risk of obesity due to sedentary behaviour. From a mental health perspective, it can contribute to feelings of isolation, anxiety, and depression, particularly when it replaces face-to-face interactions and physical activity. These effects, and most yet to mention, aren't age-dependent, and that's a point I really want to get across, as it was an essential point of my initial documentary. I set out to find the adverse effects of media consumption on different ages, but have been led in circles chasing the same answers for everything and everyone. Young, old, or anywhere in between, you can see these potential issues if you aren't following a healthy intake of screen time. There are countless things that have come due to the excessive use of mobile devices and screen time in general. One such newly found phenomenon that affects nearly 9 out of 10 undergraduates is phantom vibration syndrome. Studies suggest that this can happen to anyone, and estimates say that nearly 90% of people will experience it at least once every fortnight. These phenomenons are the least of our worries, however. but it does lead into something a bit more concerning, synonyms of such event. And though this could just be a harmless play on words, it also opens into something that is a lot more damaging, that itself being anxiety and its correlation to screen time. The point of blaming screens for mental health demise is somewhat mistaken, as if there is a balance there would be less related issues as suggested by this graph. There is a clear correlation between all of these subgroups that there is a healthy amount of screen time, but exceeding or redacting screens entirely can lead to a lower mental well-being result. It's hard for people to know a balance between too much and too little, especially as screens are everywhere now. But there is something important to note before moving on. Active and passive screen time. The difference being active screen time is productive, for example working or video chatting with family you barely see, whereas passive screen time can be seen as detrimental as it is a waste of time. Doom scrolling is a term coined as a crucial negative of screen time, in which a consumer will scroll through their device seeking out information that purposely upsets or triggers them. Now, you may think that this is just a problem for a younger demographic, as they can find themselves lost on their device, soaking up misinformation or seeking out rage-baiting content, but it's far more universal than many would first think. For example, as an adult, I find myself reading the news and clicking through various links that pop up. Before I know it, I have 20 tabs open about topics I can hardly even remember. Essentially, I've just wasted the past hour, but compare this to if I was doing work or editing this documentary like I should have been doing. I think come the end of the hour, I'd feel much more productive having conducted work instead. In conclusion, there's no agenda that there are more adverse effects for young developing minds or adults when it comes to screen time. There are, however, positives and negatives for screen time. It's important how we think about our personal screen time in regards to if we are being active or passive. In this digital era, the balance we seek may not lie in conclusive answers, but in our continuous effort to understand and adapt the world screens have created. It's not just about reducing hours, but about enhancing the hours we spend both on and off screen.